Hello and welcome to Anime Style. I am Garin Riva and today I'm going to be reviewing the 5th episode of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Each episode of this series I'll review an episode of the anime, summarising the plot and talking about my thoughts on it. Today it's episode 5, Tohru's Real World Lessons. She thinks she understands it already.
It's the best!
This episode opens with them eating breakfast with the adorable little detail of Kana struggling to use chopsticks. Kobayashi, who I'll be referring to as Red from now on, leaves for work and Kana for school. Tohru remarks to herself how her maid skills are improving and how she's getting used to the human world. At work, a colleague tells Red that she's seemed a lot happier lately, and it's revealed that it's been just 2 months since Tohru first showed up. The view then cuts back to Tohru, who's making notes based on TV shows. She notes down a recipe and that humans find love through sound. Then back to Red at work. Then back to Tohru, who stood outside Red's work. Using her perception blocking, she essentially turns invisible and walks freely around Red's workplace. She watches as Red and Takia discuss work, then goes for a little wander around the office, musing about how dragons could easily conquer humanity. Suddenly the boss begins to yell at Red for not working quicker. Sadly, he has the over-the-top exaggerated anime actions and expressions, but the funny thing is that he's the only character in the office who does. While he's yelling, Tohru overhears some colleagues discussing how the boss often foists his work onto Red. Feeling angry and protective, Tohru, while still invisible I'll remind you, trips the boss as he walks away. Embarrassed, the boss leaves. While Tohru's gloating to herself, she turns to find Red staring right at her. It's unclear if Red actually knows she's there at this point, but to be honest, I'd be surprised if she did. In a little montage, we see Red going about her workday with Tohru watching on. There's a nice little moment where Tohru's impressed by how hard Red works, further cementing her love. Right then, the boss comes back and yells again. Once he's done and turns to leave, Tohru trips him again. And then again, and then again, and then again. It's clear that Tohru's working through some anger, but it goes on just a tad too long in my opinion. Red watches on with an unreadable expression. At the end of the day, outside her office, Red waits until everyone else is gone before speaking to Tohru. Tohru immediately appears and Red's actually a little surprised that she was there. Red notes that Tohru probably found her job more boring than expected, but Tohru exclaims that it wasn't boring. She wanted to learn about Red and did just that. Red's reaction is, again, hard to read. She just says cool and then asks if Tohru's ready to go home. As they walk, she remembers what her colleague said about her being happier now and glances at Tohru. She wonders to herself what she used to be like before Tohru, happily stating that she's already forgotten. Afterwards, in a brief scene, it's hinted that Red secretly recorded her boss and got him fired for abusing his power. While out shopping, Tohru stops when she sees Fafnir standing perfectly still, his hands out in front as if holding a game controller. She invites him back to the flat where he reveals that he's decided to live in the human world for a while. Tohru tries to dissuade him, but Fafnir announces that if Tohru can live with the humans, so can he. Impulsively, Tohru begins to suggest that he live with them before seeing Red's expression and changing her mind. Fafnir states that a nearby mountain will suffice. That night, they see on the news that a 20-foot-tall monster was spotted in the mountains. Once more, Fafnir visits the flat where he declares that he shouldn't need to hide his true form and threatens to destroy humanity. Funnily enough, it's Tohru who tells him off, stating that he'll just have to fit in. She then offers to help him find somewhere to live. 5 episodes in, and they're already repeating plot points. While out in town with Fafnir, Tohru says that she watched Red move just the other day, which seems odd, timing-wise, but I assume it's just her usual blissful exaggeration. Small detail, but she goes this whole conversation doing a stupid weird walk. Anyway, she says that Fafnir needs a load of official documents to see an estate agent, which he doesn't have, so she made some for him. She even made up a human name for him based on the appearance of his dragon form. In his characteristically flat voice, Fafnir tells Tohru that she's become too much like the humans. He asks what'll happen when she returns to their world. Would she kill humans there? Could she, even? With a little smile, Tohru replies that she doesn't intend to return. She clearly belongs here. Fafnir makes the good point that Tohru will inevitably outlive Red, as dragons have much longer lifespans. Wanting to end the conversation, Tohru tells him that she's fine, she'll deal with it when it happens, and won't regret getting attached. That Red's worth it. Fafnir questions whether humans are really worth the praise Tohru gives them, and she says that they are, because Red is one of them. As they walk on, Fafnir claims he's only curious about the humans, but I reckon there's more to it. Upon reaching the office of the estate agent who helped Red move, Fafnir is asked his budget. He places a large chunk of pure gold on the desk, but the estate agent refuses to acknowledge its value. Just take it down to a cash for gold place, how is that so hard? Immediately giving up on the estate agent, Fafnir says he'll just go steal money, but Tohru humorously stops him. Sitting in a park, Tohru tries again to convince Fafnir to live in his own world and simply visit the human world. She points out that it'll be hard for him to live there without a human with whom he gets along. Then she remembers. Together they visit Takiya's house, where he seems to dwell in his otaku form. Tohru suggests that Fafnir live with him, which he immediately agrees to. Taken aback, Tohru reminds him that Fafnir is a very dangerous dragon, but the first thing Fafnir asks his new housemate is whether there are more games like the not Dark Souls he's played before. He follows Takiya into his home to learn about these other games. In the third of the unconnected mini-plots this episode's made of, Tohru and Kana are watching a magic show on TV when the magician bends a spoon with a single finger. The two dragons then proceed to destroy all of Red's cutlery, attempting to replicate the trick, before Red notes that they've not heard of psychic powers. Tohru demands whether humans really do have hidden powers, to which Red demonstrates the spoon trick. She tells them that it's just a trick that anyone can do if they learn, which Tohru takes at face value and runs with. They make a very obvious reference to the movie Lucy, when Tohru mentions the myth about humans using only 10% of their brain capacity, and a should-be-forgettable movie that talks about it. She follows the train of thought and curses humanity's laziness, in stark contrast to what she was saying to Fafnir just minutes ago, but is distracted when Kana shows her a book she found on Red's bookcase that supposedly teaches one to draw power into their hand. Red tries to tell her it's fiction, but Tohru doesn't believe her, resolving to train with the book. Almost as an afterthought, she uses her immense dragon powers to repair the bent cutlery, highlighting to Red the irony that Tohru doesn't need psychic powers. The three of them travel out to the countryside where Tohru and Kana go through the usual training montage cliches, which Red lampshades at one point, and they use the opportunity of Tohru under a waterfall to throw in a bit of light fan service. The whole thing is a very light-hearted setup for jokes to balance the rest of what was a rather character-heavy episode. Kana is adorable, Tohru is blissfully ignorant, Red is dry and witty. There are some visually interesting shots of colour and action, and I'm not going to disapprove of Tohru and a gi, so I don't have much of a problem with what is essentially very little going on. Back at the flat post-montage, Tohru still can't bend the spoon like Red did. Red asks why it's so important when Tohru can do so much that humans can't, but it seems that Tohru just doesn't want to admit to being inferior in some way to humans. Red thinks to herself that Tohru's just desperate to understand humans, particularly the things that seem to make no sense. Getting an idea, Red smiles and shows Tohru exactly how to perform the trick. I mean, she could have done that before the montage, but I get the feeling she was bored and didn't want to ruin Tohru and Kana's fun. Red tells her this trick is easy, but not all of them are. Tohru should focus on the special things that only she can do. Tohru's reaction was very subdued, and I reckon Red was worried that she'd upset her. Suddenly, however, Tohru exclaims that she'll show Red a power only she can do, and Red smiles in relief. Red agrees to watch, but tells her not to break anything. Downcast, Tohru states that means she can't do anything. Kana casually mentions that she can make electricity, which is odd, considering that's what gives her power. The last little bit of this episode is the three of them watching another magic show, in which an assistant, dressed as a Playboy bunny because of course she is, goes into one box to emerge out of the other. In between cuts, however, Tohru vanishes from the settee beside Red and emerges from the second box on what I have to assume is live television.
So pretty.
As it's confirmed it's been just 2 months since Tohru first appeared, I thought I'd talk a bit about that. That is a very short space of time. In that 2 months, Red appears to have decided that the dragons are there to stay, got a new flat and found Kana a school. I don't know how long would have been better, however. I feel it should have been long enough so that these developments didn't feel quite so impulsive, but too long and it would feel like we're missing a load of time and events. Honestly, I think I'd have been happier slowing down the whole series, giving Kana an episode or two to warm up to Red instead of 5 minutes. Having them living as a 3 in Red's old flat before moving to the new one. Just more day-to-day stuff that makes the characters so lovable. I know that TV and animation is expensive and risky. Animation is intensive work, and it's very easy to say, oh, they should have done twice the episodes, but that's a lot of hours of work and pay. I'll remind you that I haven't seen a lot of different anime, but for me, the only one that tops Dragon Maid on animation is My Hero Academia. I guess I'm glad the animation quality is so stellar, even if it means we only get 13 episodes. At time of writing, there's been no announcement to say that a second season is coming, but as much as it would sadden me, if this is all we get, it's really damn well done. Now that I think about it, I guess this is the first episode without a real plot to it. It had 3 small, unconnected plots that had different characters interacting in different ways. Most of it wasn't particularly memorable. I mean, they even reused a plot point from episode 3. I don't begrudge it too much though, because that's what Slice of Life is about. I suppose they don't need big episode-long plots if they just want to show off the characters. And it had Tohru and Igi, so, you know... Although I will mention that my favourite of her outfits are the ones where she doesn't wear the Maid hat. I don't know why, I just prefer her without it. Sadly, she seems to wear it even when not in her Maid uniform.
Yeah!
One character I don't talk about much is Takia. I don't really like him because the disconnect between his normal self and his otaku self is, jarring. The thing is, he seems like a genuinely nice guy. In this episode, Red offered to help him with his work, but when she was forced to do emergency work for the boss, Takia was very understanding. But I don't know how good friends they are. He's the only human we've seen Red hang out with, but certain lines of dialogue imply they've not done so much. It's hard to pin down. The main reason his normal versus otaku thing is so odd is he seems to lose some buck teeth when projecting his normal self, which is, of the two, the disguise. His voice also changes noticeably, taking on a more nasally tone when he's going otaku. I can believe that he fakes his voice when in public, but how does he perfectly disguise buck teeth? There were 3 one-scene cutaways this episode showing Kana and Riko at school. In one, Kana called Riko her friend, in another they shared a book and lightly bumped shoulders, and in the third, Kana served her lunch. All 3 caused Riko to do the weird thing. Still no explanation for why Riko has this sudden, almost psychotic obsession with Kana. Maybe it's so we remember it next episode when, next episode. Moving on, Tohru sort of flipped back and forth on the whole humans thing. She insulted them at Red's work, praised them to Fafnir, and then insulted them again about the psychic powers. I guess you could call it progress. Maybe she insults them as a matter of habit, but her true feelings emerged when discussing them with Fafnir. To me, it was a bit too all than nothing than all again. Kana did nothing this episode, she was just sort of there. I guess the same could be said for Red, as this was a very Tohru-heavy episode. We got some rather firm hints that she definitely cares for Tohru and is glad she's there, but they were just scattered throughout. It was interesting seeing her work and how she's perceived by her colleagues. This isn't the last look we get at her job, and I feel it was well used to show the dragon's impact in her life. It's also only implied that Red was the one to report on her boss, but it makes me wonder if it was Tohru's repeated tripping of him that gave Red the courage.
Interesting, I'll remember that.
This was an odd episode, comprised of 3 little stories. I'll be honest, in the scheme of things, I forgot this episode existed, and you could be forgiven for writing it off as general activity, except for Fafnir moving in with Takia. Perhaps they decided to focus an episode on just that, but found they didn't have enough to fill one. If their response was adding fun little stories about the dragons interacting, I'm all for it. Thank you very much for watching, please consider pledging to my Patreon linked in the description, and I will catch you later.